I was born here in Kings Mountain, and it's my my mother's side of the family dates back to the Revolutionary battle here, her ancestors, and my father's side, my grandfather moved and started the Presbyterian Church here in town.
So you feel very connected. And
Absolutely.
do you feel, tell us about your father's work here and what your work has evolved into.
My father's, after he was a senior at Davidson, World War II broke out, and he joined the Marine Corps. And when the outbreak of the Korean War, he found out he signed up for the reserves and served 2 years in the Korean War, after which I think my mother was getting homesick, so he was an engineer out of Georgia Tech, got his master's degree from Tech, and he came home and bought the Kings Mountain Cotton Oil Company from my uncle. Ran that until the mid-'60s, and then those businesses started to wane, and he started Gilbert Patrick Yarn Mill.
Tell us about the cottonseed oil business. Is that what it was? And
It was.
Why did it decline here in Cleveland County?
It was a cotton gin, ice plant, oil mill, and coal yard. And the cotton in this area, the farmers were starting to switch to soybeans, to some more lucrative products. Cotton basically moved out to the plains in California. And the reason for that is it was hotter, drier, and you can irrigate it. You could put the water to the cotton when it needed it rather than relying on Mother Nature.
I'm sorry, did that happen before or after the boll weevil?
I think it was all, it would have been after.
After the boll weevil.
Boll weevil was
after
about 49.
It was after the boll
After
weevil.
the boll weevil.
This was in the 60s.
So then he started a yarn mill.
Yes.
Tell us about his yarn mill.
He took $2,000 and bought some very used textile machinery, and started a yarn mill. At that started off in upholstery, then moved into janitorial yarns. But at that point in time in Kings Mountain, there was 10 to 11 family-owned yarn spinning plants in town alone, not counting knitting, weaving, dyeing and finishing, cutting sew. This was very much a textile industry, a community rather. Gastonia next door was Spindle City, had more spindles per capita than any other city in the world. And then you had Charlotte sitting boasting that they had more they were the metropolis. They had more textiles in a 100-mile radius than any other metropolis in the world. And so it was very much textile orientated.
What year was that?
That was mid-'60s.
Mid-'60s.
Yes.
Have you experienced the decline of the textile industry in your business?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Talk to us about that.
The textiles, with it being so family orientated as far as the businesses, it's always metamorphosed, even before so you had some plants would come in, phase out, depending on whether the apparel, you had the double knit fad and the other industry fad, so it would move in and out, and if family plants didn't invest money back into the facility, it would basically wane. The biggest demise for the textile industry came first with NAFTA, then with WTO. I still say that NAFTA was a good trade agreement. I believe in trading with your neighbors. If there's any kind of issues, the neighbors are going to stand with neighbors. WTO basically put the American manufacturing competing with a communist nation that had all the resources that was after an industry to employ their civilians, their population. We're used to, we'd come up with a new product. I would go to another entrepreneur. After the meeting, you'd walk out the door, you knew you had a new product, you knew where you stood, you knew where the pricing. This day and age, we come up with a new product, we're shipping it halfway around the world to finish manufacturing. Our raw materials, instead of being made in Alabama, being made in Georgia, they're being made in Asia, Korea. So we're importing a whole lot more fibers and raw materials than we used to, and we're exporting a whole lot more than we used to. But but we have seen, as we mentioned before, a lot of good companies, a lot of good family-owned textile companies that are no longer in business, and really didn't do anything. They reinvested, they made all the right decisions, but just couldn't compete against the nation.
Did those family-owned businesses, did any of them go overseas to China, or did China just do it on their own and cause the problem?
Mostly China did it on their own. Most of the family-owned businesses that try to go over, most of them were not of the size that they could go over and do a joint venture in Asia themselves. They didn't have the finances. The companies that I have known that have gone over, there you have a mixed results on the success on how well they've done. Because usually what happens, they'll put a facility up, and depending on what technology they take over, that technology is stolen from them, and then they're competing with that same technology from another facility. So it's a mixed results on how successful they've been.
Tell us about the products that you're making now. Were you making them 10 years ago? I would say in our portfolio, there's not a single product that we're making 10 years ago that that's still in the same fashion that it is today. Our mindset is what we make today we didn't make 3 years ago. What we make 3 years from today won't be what we're making today. We continually, as far as evolving with raw materials, as far as products, we continually reinvent ourselves. And that's also with raw materials, also manufacturing processes or procedures. So always evolve.
If we could go back a little bit, how about telling us what textiles meant to this region back in its heyday in the 30s and 40s, and what it meant to this region?
Well, if you go back in history, you have, after the war between the states, the South was completely devastated. Its currency was worthless. Large amount, its wealth was gone, and a large amount of its land wealth was now owned from northern identities. And we were basically a sharecropper society. And the monies that the farmers made was moved out of this area. And so textiles was the vehicle that this area needed to elevate our standard of living from that of a sharecropper society.
And how did the textiles, they seemed like where there was textile plants, that's where the population was at, lived in their own company-owned homes and had their own stores and banks.
Correct. It's for the farmers coming in from the tenant farmers, or the employees moving in from the farms. They were living in a tenant house before, so they had no means of buying a house to live in to work at the plant. So the mill supplied the housing, and basically, and the mill village was a very family-orientated atmosphere. The plants looked after their employees very well. But it's and the textile industry in the South supplied for a lot of education, a lot of livelihoods, and supported our troops and supplied the products needed for the major wars that we've been in.
Obviously, your family background is deep, with your mother and all that being involved, her family in the Battle of Kings Mountain. Is there anything about the Battle of Kings Mountain that you feel connected to because of that, or the character of those men?
Well, obviously they had to be tough to be living in this area in that time in history. I'm kin to Colonel Frederick Hambright, who was commander of one of the regiments, local regiments. Also kin to Arthur Patterson, who history has it was 80 years old, and his two sons and a neighbor's son did not come home one evening after going out looking for stray cattle. There's rumors of British activity in the area. So the next morning, Arthur Patterson grabs his musket and goes looking for the British to barter the release of his children. Fell into the regiment's mustering at the bottom of the mountain, getting ready to attack. Fell in with the local regiment, and at 80 years old, he was in the Battle of Kings Mountain. At the same time, his two sons and neighbor sons were tied to trees in the British encampment. But I'm very proud of them, and also proud of all my relatives who've fought in all the major conflicts that this country's been into. But if for this area, yes, it's very deep in history, and I'm proud to be part of it.
How would you describe the workforce here in Cleveland County today?
Superb would be a good word. The employees or this area has an excellent work ethic and very religious orientated, and I would match them with any workforce anywhere in the world.
What challenges do you see in running a state-of-the-art plant here in Cleveland County? Governmental challenges, or?
I would say the biggest challenge is the changing atmosphere in Washington on bartering trade agreements and not learning from their past trade agreements, and then not enforcing the trade agreements that they currently have. And that.
What would you tell a young person now about the textile business in Cleveland County?
If there's a textile facility spinning in operation today, they have weathered the test of time. They will be here. I believe all the manufacturing, the textile manufacturing, textile-related manufacturing that is left in this country today will be here and will thrive. And I actually think you'll see a rebound of some of the manufacturing.
I was just about to ask you that. Did you think we'll see textiles come back?
Never.
U.S. manufacturing.
Never to the degree that we previously had it. But if the United States, if we would, if the State Department would quit doing our trade agreements and let the Commerce Department do it, we'd be better off. The trade agreement that now they're trying to push through is, since the U.S. has soured on trade agreements, we're doing a Trans-Pacific Partnership. So we dropped the trade agreement, and we're pushing, the State Department's pushing this through because they see China building up the power in the Pacific Rim, and by trade agreements, if we were asking Vietnam and Korea, pushing them into it, and so we can build a stronger partnership with and deter them and be a force with China in the Pacific. Well, if trade agreements made really good, strong partners, then China should be our best friend in the world for what we've given them. But yes, do I see a rebound in some of the manufacturing? Yes, I do.
Do you see young people going into studies of textile, like at State or Georgia Tech? You see research being here?
NC State still has one of the largest textile schools in the country, and yes, it's they saw a small drop in of enrollment 2 years ago, but it's bounced back. And most young students now are. I was at Georgia Tech, and it was the textile school, and they changed it to the Palmer and Textile Science. And it was a big debate. Do we drop the word textile? Well, we did a survey, and most of the younger students you think of textiles, instead of thinking of underwear, sweaters, and all, they think of medical textiles, the high performance textiles. And so actually textiles in the younger generation does not come with the normal ray persona.
Talk to us about some of your current products that will be out of date 3 years from now.
Well, we are a very solution-orientated textile manufacturer. So we have companies coming to us, and they say, okay, here's our issues, here's the problems we're having, how can we engineer yarn around it? So we will engineer yarn for their specific end use. We do yarns. If it's a fiber, we spin it. We spin fibers for protective wear for heat and fire, for cut protection. We use Kevlars, PBIs, PBOs. We use stainless steel yarn fibers for heat protection, cut protection. We do, and also for, like the one yarn I showed you, we have yarn that has stainless steel that's used in base layers for taser dissipation. We have Teflon blended yarns for aluminum extrusion plants. We have OPF yarns for high heat applications. So it's customers come to us and we give them a list of all the fibers. So here's the ingredients. Here's what we're able to here's the ingredients we have, and then we find out what they're after. Then we go back into the kitchen and cook it up for them.
In the history of the textiles back, I'm thinking about the Lorraine Mill strike. Everybody thinks that Cleveland County had difficult times in that era because of the Lorraine Mill. Do you have any knowledge about what was going on at that period of time and how we've managed to be relatively union-free?
Of that bit of history, I do know of the strike, and of the. I think there was two deaths, or I think a sheriff was killed and a couple of protesters. I don't think that was so much kept the textiles from unionizing, as much of the fact that the mill ownership looked after the employees. It was very much of a fraternal. And the plants that are left today, it's still not to the degree that it was, but it was very much a fraternal atmosphere, and the need for a union, I don't think was evident for the employees. Didn't see where it benefited them.
You described the workforce as being superb. Is it a smaller workforce or a better trained workforce, or is the worker also resilient, that they are eager to learn more?
They're eager to learn, and with a good work ethic. And with a good educational foundation.
We want to talk a little bit about the culture of Cleveland County, what really makes Cleveland County unique in the region, or even in the country. And we do anticipate that we'll have national visitors coming here because of Earl's name, and we want to give them enough Earl's history, but we wanted them to know about our region. And how would you describe the region that you've lived in and you're working in? What's unique about the region?
Well, we don't want to tell them too many secrets. They might move here. Number one, just the geographic area is great. You can be at the beach in 4.5 hours, be in a mountain 1.5 hours. You have 4 seasons. None of them are really that extreme. It's just a beautiful part of the world. I've traveled the entire world and enjoy coming home and calling this home. That coupled with the community atmosphere, it's a good, nice place to go home.
It has changed somewhat because of the loss, I think, of the textiles, and that while it's still the great place to live, you hit on it earlier, when the mills had the family orientation, and they had their own ball teams and
That's correct.
their own churches, and everybody was right there together, and, you know, it was one, in one sense, it was a big family.
That is absolutely
And-
correct. And the, well, and you talk about the ball teams. We could go back and almost have a special on how all the major league ball players that came from this area.
Yeah.
And but all the teams, each plant sponsored teams, and that was here again part of the community of supporting the community and of the employees. But it's very much so.
And there was a tradition of playing music among the mill workers. And there's a lot of interest now in the music of the mills. And do you have any recollection of that?
No, that's probably before my time. That's before my time. But it's I did like the way Earl talked about it's in between DOFs. It was nothing to do, but they found something to do. Something to fill the time in.
Okay. So textiles are alive and well in Cleveland County.
Textiles, the few of us that's left, it's alive and well, and it's I think will continue to prosper.
All right, talk to us about your earth-friendly products, because people are so interested in being LEED certified or being green, and what you're doing in that arena.
Well, the being green in today's world also goes hand in hand with being a smart manufacturer. Being green is, and there's a zillion different terminologies or definitions of what is being green. Is saving electricity being green? Is addition of solar powers being green? The reduction of waste from your facilities being green? Better manufacturing procedures being green? Or using green raw materials? Which part is green? But we try to encompass all that, and so it's from as far as power reduction, as far as reducing all landfill waste that the plants produce. That's what we're encompassing all that. But we also do. We also spend fibers from recycled raw materials, such as your PET bottles, your plastic beer bottles, and sun-drop bottles. And we also spend all the bast fibers, which are a renewable raw fiber that does not require the natural resources as a cotton would require, or the fertilizers and the heavy irrigation. But and then we also do the renewables as far as the PLA, which is made from corn, or the fibers made from soybean, or rayon made from bamboo, or fibers made from milk.
Gilbert, what Charlotte claimed that they had more spindles than any city in the world, and within a 75-mile radius. I think I saw where you said that.
That is correct, sir.
What did Charlotte mean to the textile industry and industry at large?
I think it's more of what the textile industry meant to Charlotte.
Okay.
Because it's you had Cannon Mills. You had, if you look at that 75 or 100-mile radius, you had Springs Industries, you had Cannon Mills, you had Lowenstein, you had Burlington Mills had a huge exposure in around the Charlotte area. You had so that money or the banking, the textile industry made Charlotte the banking center it is today. So that's
in that ring of 100-mile radius. We didn't have a Springs or a Cannon, a big name. But how would you describe Cleveland County's niche in the region as far as the importance of textiles? What were we known for?
imagine in the textiles in its heyday. I imagine Durand Mills was the crown jewel of the textile industry in Cleveland County. It's you had Spindale, the plants in Spindale, and then the Durand. But I imagine that was in its heyday. That they would have been the crown jewel. And unfortunately, neither one of them are with us today.
How would the hosiery industry have stacked up this region versus other parts of the country?
Hosiery up around Hickory is huge. As far as making this area making yarns for the hosiery, but in Hickory it's huge. But most of your hosiery was in Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the questions that our museum team's asking us to ask everybody, and I just thought about it, but probably should ask you, is that, and you went to school here, when integration came along, how would you describe the integration process here in Cleveland County?
My experience is it went very smooth. I don't think Cleveland County had near I don't really know of any uproar, any type of huge resentment whatsoever. I was in the 6th grade. What did surprise me is when I was in high school several years later, that Boston and the northern cities were just integrating then, and then all the rioting and the unrest that happened in the northern cities. But it's my experience is in the South, basically we were integrated. Other than as I was raised by a black housekeeper, I grew up playing with I had a lot of black friends growing up, so it wasn't really a cultural change.
And then how about the mills when they integrated?
That was before my time, and it's as far as I don't know of any real unrest or issues that caused.
JT, you think of anything else? We've sort of covered our core questions, but you can talk to us. Larry won't be here at 11.
As far as the education, and regardless of what industry you're going into, a good education is absolutely positively essential. Even in the textile machines that we have today, they're highly computerized. And we are not spending, all the industries left are making a highly valued, highly mechanized or automated machines operations, and that to just come out without a good education, you're behind the 8 ball right out of your chance of a good livelihood is eluding you. But anyway, and as far as in textiles, I should have mentioned, but 27% of all world commerce is textile related. It's when you go, if I go across the road to Firestone, or to Gates Rubber, it's a standing joke. I'm talking to the textile people. Well, the textile engineers will tell the polymer engineers, the rubber, that if it wasn't for the textiles, your rubber, you can't make a tire, and so your rubbers are there just to hold our textiles together. But and your new Boeing Dreamliner, all carbon fibers, and we're working on some yarns going into their aerodynamics or the airplanes with carbon fibers, but all of all world commerce, 27% is textile oriented.
Gilbert, you mentioned automation, and certainly that's changed this whole country and industry. As a comparative thing, a pure estimate, if you were doing the same thing you're doing today 25 years ago, what would be your population in the workforce as compared today with all the automation?
Oh, no, this is an easy one. Now we're in technical textiles, so we have more of a workforce. But the plant next door is a Parkdale plant, and the yarns they were making today, I think that plant's doing about 800,000 pounds of yarn a week. When I went to Georgia Tech, you counted on one person per 1,000 pounds of yarn a week. So that would have been 800 people workforce. They have 7 people per shift running the facility.
And while we think, that's bad, we put people out of work, really what happened is saved the industry.
That is correct.
It saved
That is
the
correct.
industry.
What saved the industry?
Automation.
Automation.
Yeah, because it's and that's what as of just 8 years ago, the textile industry bought more capital equipment than any other manufacturing industry in this country. That's including pharmaceuticals, including petrochemicals. But the textile industry, we had a very thriving, very modernized textile industry in this country.
Is the American Textile Association still vibrant? Or do you have a core, a peer group that you get with?
Yes, we do.
What is it called?
It's the National Association of Textile Organizations. And it's used to, in the trade groups, you got together and you would go to Sea Island or someplace fun. Now we go to Washington to try to educate our congressional representatives on the importance of textiles and manufacturing in this country, period.
And one of the questions we try to ask everybody, what is your hope for the future?
My hope for the future, this is general. I hope that our leaders in Washington can get their act together, get the budget in line. I had a congressional aide call and asked me to sit in on a congressional hearing on the president's initiative for exporting, and wanted to hear from a small to medium-sized manufacturer. And I told her that, I said, it's really very easy. I said, all you have to do is to get China to quit manipulating the currency and enforce our trade laws. And her exact words were, we can't do that. I said, well, it should be a very interesting conversation. Well, they called back 2 days later, said they didn't need me. But anyway, but this is a fantastic country. Washington needs to start legislating, and enforcing their trade laws, get our finances in order, and we need to concentrate on education. But unfortunately, our education system is starting to fail our students, and without that, we're putting our country into the sharecropper situation that the South was after the war, with the poor education.
How do you feel about all this attention, like being written up in Time magazine? 2 pages in Time magazine. That's amazing.
Well, that came out, and that was nice. I was more excited about making the cover, one of our products making the cover of Future Materials the following month. And so to me that was more impressive than the Time magazine. Yeah, the Time magazine was they found us. We just do what we do.